In fact, there's only one species that the underground pipeline, after you've done your study, is likely to destroy. And that species is the Osama death adder. It is an extremely dangerous snake. Deaths reported from the hospital. Surely the CITES Convention doesn't protect animals that are killing people.
Absolutely.
Really?
Yes. Great white shark, well protected, well loved, yeah, but dangerous.
Yes, the death adder kills, according to records, 5 amnesians a year. That's not much, is it? Except to the amnesians, I suppose, Henry Puna. The records say only 5, but when Simran, interestingly enough, was bitten, her parents didn't take her to hospital. They took her to the local snake charmer, who bit out the poison, said a few mantras, and she survived. Unlike a lot of others, Juliana, in the village, the people who get bitten by the snake don't go to hospital. They go to the local shaman, the local snake charmer. And in fact, the casualties, as you know, are much greater.
There may be some indigenous knowledge that the snake charmer has that saves the lives of the people who are bitten. He probably has the root of something that has an antitoxin.
India announced this week that it always thought that 2,000 people a year died from snake bite. They've now discovered that they've been relying on hospital records and that in fact 46,000 people a year die in India from snake bite. So that's an example of data that's been focusing on the wrong hospital records, a very Western idea.
Right.
But in a society like Amnesia, everyone goes to the local shaman and a lot die.
Do any of them have cell phones? Can we ask them?
Not yet, not yet. There's an Eye on Earth operation that gives free cell phones to people who look for alien species that are invading, but it hasn't got to the village yet. The new survey is done, and it turns out that 200 people a year die from the bite of this wretched snake. Surely you don't want to protect a snake like that.
Of course. I mean, surely you don't want a world where you destroy every animal that has any dangerous component.
You want a world where 200 people a year are destroyed.
No.
If this snake were a terrorist, if it was a member of Al-Qaeda, and it killed 200 amnesians a year, we'd want to wipe it out, wouldn't we?
Let's talk about the snake. The snake is there.
Let's talk about deadly snakes. I mean, this is absurd, isn't it? Protecting a snake, the only value of which is to kill amnesians.
No, the value of the snake, it has a whole role in the ecosystem. It's much wider than just the snake. It plays a role in the ecosystem, keeping it healthy.
This snake doesn't.
It doesn't. What an interesting snake. Then it should definitely be listed.
This is one snake that no one has ever been able to find a role in any ecosystem.
Then there are many other ways to deal with snake bite. The snake bite from any snake can be cured. So what we need to look at is what is the information available with respect to a way to cure people from that bite.
So the answer might be to find an antidote and then to supply the antidote to all the shamans and snake charmers and so forth. That might be one way. It's not an easy way. It's not an immediate way. And Henry Puna, you're facing an election. The people hate the snake. It's killing them. You can see the signs, death to the death adder. So your party decides that it will go for the tunnel. There'll be a few disruptions, no doubt, in a rainforest. A few flocks of birds might have to relocate to different trees, but the kryptonite goes ahead. You're looking to dynamite the rocky outcrop where the kryptonite is underneath. You're walking around before the dynamite goes in. You see the entrance to a cave. You might go in and take a look before the dynamite goes in.
Yep.
A most amazing cave, a treasure trove of prehistoric art. There are dinosaur pictures and dodos, and marsupial lions and winged crocodiles. It really is the most extraordinary vista that you see on the cave wall. Pity about that, isn't it, if the dynamite goes in tomorrow?
Well, not sure. We'll do what Napoleon did with the pyramids and the obelisk. We'll take it down and bring it elsewhere, and then we'll dig for the kryptonite.
What a good idea. We could take off the walls these amazing pictures, take them out of the cave
To the Metropolitan Museum in London.
down the
where all
underground road. The capital of amnesia is Nirvana. It's quite a tourist destination. We could put in the museum at Nirvana. You are head of the Euphorian Aid and Environment Agency, and you're very keen, obviously, to help these poor people who are just across the sea. Would that be a good idea? Would you support building a museum so that they can see these amazing cave pictures?
Absolutely.
Because otherwise people will have to come to the place to visit the cave, and
Yes.
that will actually be much more detrimental to the environment
Of course.
than the mine itself.
Yeah, they could be blown up by dynamite, they could be bitten by the death adder, you never know. But here in Nirvana, the people will be able to appreciate their heritage on the wall. Hassan, are you in favor of the museum that the kind Euphorians are prepared to build?
Absolutely, why not? Here's a piece of history, and we can talk about our history.
There are some indigenous groups, and you're the head of one of them, Juliana, which is a bit worried about this. This is your heritage. That was where your ancestors painted and lived and died. That's their cave. That was where they believed that these animals had a religious significance. Are you happy about this mining company cutting the pictures off the caves and taking them down to a tourist resort for people to see?
Absolutely not, because not only are you being robbed of the heritage, but is there any sort of compensation? Do we have any rights to the things that are in that land? So is the mining company going to compensate us?
Absolutely, Juliana. We would have to come to you and convey a meeting with you, and through a process understand what it is that you feel. After all, it's your heritage, it's your property, it's your right to be there.
What about the rights to the kryptonite? Do we also have rights to what's underneath the beautiful paintings?
Absolutely do. Absolutely do.
Then I might be willing to negotiate.
Okay.
So you trade the spiritual values of your ancestors.
Well, it's the ancestors would understand that, you know.
Are you still a member of Juliana's group, Simran, or are you going to join a more radical group that wants to leave the cave paintings and the kryptonite there?
I'd like to stay with Juliana.
You'll take the money?
Yes, I would.
So much for the spiritual beliefs of your ancestors.
It's a belief that stays in your heart.
Well, Henry Pruner, your party is split on this one. Some of your MPs think that it's sacrilege to take the work of your ancestors off the rocks and show them in a museum. Others rather like the idea of compensation.
If there is a possibility that taking them off the wall, would give them more life and enable them to endure more into the future, then obviously that's a good option to take.
I would agree with Mr. Prime Minister and say this is much greater than just a picture on the wall. This is a preservation of knowledge. This is a conservation of a history. And we would be working with our partners to ensure that this legacy, through a museum, can be propagated to the future.
The Museum of National Heritage in Nirvana attracts even more people to this lovely place with its beautiful swimming beach. Sylvia Earle, this country is interesting enough on the surface. What do you think it's like below the surface?
If it is not known, exploration should follow.
And you're an undersea explorer. I guess you've got your own submarine, haven't you? Or
Of course.
submersible? You have a yellow submarine that you drive
Mine is
around. Yours is blue submarine. Do you allow scientists to drive it?
Scientists are the best drivers.
Don't they get so immersed in their thoughts that they run into whales and things? You moor your blue submersible at Nirvana Beach, and off you go, puttering around, because global warming has changed the way fish species move around the ocean currents. You notice a few great white sharks. You come back and you moor your blue submersible. You see a few people going for a swim. There's Jacqueline McGlade in her bikini going down to the water. Would you say anything to her?
If they're man-eaters, she wouldn't have to worry.
Well, it could be a girl eater. You're not going to mention the sharks. It's no big deal.
Well, I might say, let's go look at the sharks. They're really cool.
And you take her down in your submersible.
Sure.
You wouldn't swim out to them.
Although great whites, you think twice about, fooling around with them.
You might think twice about fooling around with them unless you're on a CITES list operator. I'm sure they're protected, aren't they, John Scanlon?
Absolutely.
They do eat half a dozen people a year, I guess.
Possibly more than that, but
Still, they're protected. You don't mention it to the bathers. Dennis Garrity is going in for a swim.
There's some really neat sharks out there. You ought to go see them.
Do you still go for that swim?
No.
Princess Razan is walking towards the water with a few security guards. Do you mention to them that there are great white sharks out there?
Why not? Because they should be thrilled that these creatures live right there.
Well, Princess, are you going to dip a toe in the water? Your security guards seem a little worried.
Silvio, I'd ask Silvio, can I dip my toe in the water?
The sharks are beyond the coral, but it's getting high tide. No one has mentioned sharks, Henry Puna. You're making a face, Prime Minister.
I don't like sharks.
This is a bit worrying, isn't it? If people get to know that it's full of sharks, your tourists aren't going to come, are they? That's what happened with Praslin in the Seychelles. They covered up the first shark death, and then there was a second. Now tourists avoid that beach. It's a bit of a problem, isn't it?
Bit of a problem, yes, indeed.
What are you going to do? Hope that Sylvia doesn't tell too many people?
Well, I might do what they do in Australia. They put up nets.
You could put
Yes.
up nets. That would be a very good. It might spoil the beauty of the beach.
Not a good idea.
You could put a net, a shark net, would be a possibility.
Be a possibility,
Because
yes.
that would alert everyone to the fact that there are sharks.
How much do we have to fear this shark?
The sharks have more to fear from us than we have to fear from the sharks, and that's just the truth.
The next step, I'd ask the guy from CITES to take a swim in the
Ask
water.
the guy from Ask John Scanlon.
Would you go in the water?
I would go in the water, but not beyond the reef.
But Prime Minister, your idea of netting, would you go ahead with that before there's a shark death?
I would.
So you'll net the beach. There might be sonars as well. Back to the commons where we began. Simran, you're still there. Still minding the cattle. You've got a few more by now. And one day, some people from an organization called Eye on Earth come to see whether you want to participate as a citizen scientist. All you have to do, they'll give you a smartphone, and they want you to take pictures of any alien species that invades the commons. They're looking for any flora or fauna that is unusual.
I would take the smartphone.
There's nothing new on the commons. There hasn't been much new for centuries. Although there is a species of fruit bat that comes from the rainforest. You can see them there. They're like upside-down umbrellas. You think I on Earth would be interested in that? It's the only
Maybe.
change. You take pictures and you upload them on your computer and send them off to Eye on Earth, although there just seem to be uninteresting pictures of fruit bats and cows in the commons. Princess, you're now the ruler of Euphoria, and you've got a report on your desk this morning from the local hospital. They've discovered a man with a virus that they can't work out what it is. He's got blotches all over his skin, eruptive sores. They're a bit afraid it could be the Ebola virus.
The Ebola virus is commonly transmitted through bushmeat, the butchering by humans of chimpanzees, and other. There are, unfortunately, rich experience in recent years with viruses borne by fruit bats.
You've had 3 more patients in today, and you know what it will mean. If you tell the world that there's this unknown virus that could be deadly, that started in Euphoria, you're going to be put in quarantine. Tourists aren't going to come until it's solved. You keep it secret, like the Chinese kept SARS a secret for a while, or do you try and give your doctors a few more days?
No, we know what happened when we kept that a secret, so...
So you announce it immediately.
We disclose.
And David Lodge in America, who knows a little about fruit bats, you identify this virus because it's carried by fruit bats quite benignly, isn't it? It doesn't hurt the bat.
It's common for viruses to not cause symptoms in the bats, but to cause severe symptoms in pigs and other livestock.
But the problem is how it could be transmitted.
Right, so we would have to be open to the possibility that this is not a virus we've observed before, but we do have the forewarning of experience that...
You go, I guess, your researcher searches every reference to fruit bat, every picture that's out there on the net, and comes across Simran's picture of the fruit bats in the tree, the cows, they're even milky white, so she's taken a picture of eating some grass that seems to have some fruit bat droppings on it.
So this immediately fits the pattern that we've seen before with emerging viruses like Nipah and Hendra.
You know, when she takes her cows to market, that they're bought and they're taken to the wharves in Amnesia, put on board a ship, and taken across to Euphoria, where they're slaughtered by halal methods, which involves cutting their throat and a lot of blood. Does that assist your detective work?
That is one of many pieces of information that one would want to gather. While this detective work is going on, they might want to consider some rather strong measures, since, as with SARS, no action early on ended up costing the world $40 to $50 billion. It's a good idea to do some preventative work first rather than pay very high costs later.
What do you advise being done?
Well, it depends. It depends how fast the disease is spreading. If it's spreading very fast, it's not dangerous. The only dangerous diseases are the ones which have a very long time of incubation, because then they can spread without being noticed. If they spread very fast, then it's very easy to isolate the people who are ill until they're cured, and you stop the progression of the disease. So I would recommend really looking at how fast it goes and hoping that the princess would have informed the WHO and international authorities.
And that you've notified the World Health Organization, and it is a fast-spreading disease. So Euphoria is in quarantine, no one can move in or out. No Euphorian can travel, tourists don't come, but a vaccine is on the way. Silvio, your laboratory is producing a vaccine. You're using patients, you're using the data from patients in Euphoria, and you develop a vaccine that you put on the market and sell to all countries who are desperate to get the vaccine. You're making a lot of money. Your shares are going up. You're a member, Jacqueline, of a patient support group. They come to you and say, is it right that this company, Sergio's company, should be making so much money? We were the guinea pigs, in effect. We were those in hospital whose data he used to develop his vaccine.
We would be strongly advocating to the WHO, to governments, to say this is now got to be a public good. And it's a very fast-spreading virus, clearly. So we need to do something more than just quarantine people. And in fact, it should be the Center for Disease Control, probably, together with the WHO, facilitating it and making it available without cost across the world as quickly as possible.
And those 40 or 50 Euphorians who've been in hospital, whose personal data has been used by Silvia's company, whose personal data has been used by Sergio's company to develop the vaccine and the treatment program, should be compensated?
Not necessarily compensated, particularly if they've survived a deadly virus. I think they should, though, be acknowledged for their contribution to the public good.
So, Sergio, you make the money. You don't have to directly compensate the people whose data you used. Do you think that's fair? I suppose you do.
I like to sleep quietly at night.
Yes.
So if the way happens that I get compensated, and I'm a withstanding researcher, I would make sure that at least a good percentage of the income goes to establish a good national park for the bat, for the snake, for the rhino, so that he will not get in touch with human being, despite the 7 million.
Would you as well, Sergio, give a prize to the people who were responsible for tracking this dreadful disease?
I would give them the highest visibility.
There are things, but when you're a 13-year-old impoverished girl herding your cows on the commons, there may be a future that could be assured by an award, a prize. It would enable you to go back to school. You could go and get a degree in earth sciences at the Euphorian School of Economics.
I would love that.
You've got it. But what about the commons? We've forgotten the commons. What has to happen to the commons? Cattle have eaten the droppings. Dennis Garrity, what does that mean?
Well, I think we have bats, and we have cattle, and we have people.
Well, we have a tree. We can cut down the bat tree and poison the bats. But you remember the blazing pyres after mad cow disease.
Yeah.
There's no alternative, is there?
I suppose that you might have to slaughter the cattle that have eaten the bat.
You'd have to slaughter the cattle. Wouldn't your readers be very upset if they thought their hamburgers might still come from infected cattle?
Yeah, absolutely. And the next step is, where does that cattle go? Where do we do it?
Where does that cattle go? It certainly doesn't go to the halal butchery in Euphoria, where the transmission from cattle to human began. The commons is burnt, the cattle have to be slaughtered and burnt. That's the tragedy of the commons. A metaphor for a world where states can't agree on the need to limit greenhouse gases, where states follow their own individual choice. As we've seen, it may be that by the acquisition of more information, with more information, states themselves may make choices in the common good. Thank you all.